Part 48. Super Zoo. Author, Yin Se Nian Bai. Chapter 471. Hearing what Adnan said, Zhao Yun, who was always there, and Ludmila, who was fearless, both frowned at the same time. If it is for money, then we still need to discuss it, but when it comes to religious issues, especially in places like the Middle East, any issue involving religion is a big problem and there is basically no room for negotiation. Giving money rashly will not only fail to make the other party make concessions, it may have the opposite effect and make the other party feel that it is an insult to their beliefs. What will happen if you insult a Middle Easterner's faith? Just look at Basel on the plain. This is more serious than digging up someone's ancestral grave in China. Boss, the soldiers in this platoon are all Luers, from the same tribe. The merrics of their tribe need a large amount of powder ground from rhinoceros horns to perform religious ceremonies and communicate with their gods, so they must take away the two rhinoceros, Adnan translated. Su Ming was confused. Zhao Yun explained, Milike is the leader of a tribe with religious beliefs. The Milike is generally held by the oldest and most prestigious priest. The Luer people are from Iraq. A minority of less than 5,000 people, living in the mountainous area bordering the government forces, and the Kurds in the north, supports the government forces. Soldiers from small tribes like this are only loyal to their own tribes, and the government treats them. There is not much control. Also, religious rituals are very sacred here and must not be profaned. Su Ming nodded and asked Adnan to ask, do you need so many rhino horns? There are 2 rhinos. Can't you cut off a section of the horn and take it away? Anyway, he wants to be a rhinoceros. It's not a big problem if the horn is missing. It can still grow back. It's not like the other party wants to eat rhinoceros meat. Unexpectedly, the other officer quickly shook his head and took out a crumpled document. Adnan looked at the document, turned to Su Ming and said helplessly, they insisted on taking away the 2 rhinos, and the government departments have already agreed, they have approval documents. How about money? Su Ming finally came up with his trump card, as long as they can keep the rhinoceros, I can pay them a considerable amount of cash. Of course, the rhino horns will still be taken away by them. Adnan boldly translated again, and the officer suddenly became furious. He didn't need to translate this time. He could tell by his expression that it was no good. You're still being unreasonable. The bastard is so determined to pay back the weight. Su Ming was a little annoyed. He was eating eggs and killing the hens. He already agreed to give them rhino horns. Why did he insist on rhinoceros? What a brain. It's just like a stick. You are the one who is being unreasonable. They have government approval and it is legal to take away the rhino. Ludmila seemed to be happy to see Su Ming deflated. Seeing that Su Ming was depressed, she was in a good mood. She transformed into a charming female bear and touched Su Ming's face, my dear, it's a pity. You're a step too late. Too late? Su Ming waved his hand, opened Ludmila's hand, held the heavy machine gun on the car with one hand, and sneered. Ludmila was not angry either, and looked at Su Ming with a smile to see how he would solve this problem. Zhao Yun knew Su Ming well. This little kid had a bad temper and dared to make a move. He quickly persuaded him, calm down, Ludmila is right. Even though the people in the zoo are not happy, these soldiers are indeed legally, in order to gain the support of various tribes, the Iraqi government has offered many preferential conditions. Maybe these 2 rhinos are one of the conditions in exchange for the support of the Luer people. If there is a riot, the Chinese embassy and the Iraqi government will never stand on your side, don't do anything stupid. Don't worry, I can do anything stupid. Su Ming waved his hand and said to Adnan, tell them, since we have the approval, of course we will not stop it, but we want to go with them and take a last look at these 2 rhinos. It's always okay. The officer looked at the armed off-road vehicle in confusion and said a few words. Adnan translated, he said yes, but he can only keep the pistol he carries with him. He must leave the off-road vehicle and rifle, for fear that we will harm the rhino. Damn it, I've become a bad guy, Su Ming laughed and jumped out of the car first. He was completely covered with only a cold pistol on his waist and a large military water bottle on his back. Nothing else. What are you going to do? Is there any meaning in taking a look at the rhinoceros? Ludmila also followed and asked in confusion. Su Ming smiled and said nothing. If you play religion with me, you will not be killed. So a group of people walked towards the National Zoo in Baghdad. The zoo staff were almost led by a squad of soldiers holding them down with guns. Even though the other party had approval, the people at the Baghdad Zoo were still unwilling to let the soldiers take away the rhino. Su Ming could completely understand this feeling. If someone forcibly took away the animals from the Yangchuan City Zoo, even if it was approved by the government, he would definitely feel sad and would argue vigorously. Su Ming and his group walked in the middle, followed by a squad of soldiers, as they walked towards the inside of the park. The Baghdad Zoo is much larger than the private zoos I visited in the afternoon. It is almost as big as half of the Yangchuan Zoo. What I saw along the way is that various animals do not live in iron cages like private zoos. Each has its own small area. However, many areas are empty, deserted and without animals. A large sunken cement pond, about more than 100 square meters, half of the pond is mud, and the other half is grass. Two large one-horned rhinos are lying motionless in the mud. Oh my god, it's so big. This was Nangong Wang's first time observing a real rhinoceros up close, and the visual impact was quite strong. An adult great one-horned rhinoceros weighs about 2 tons. What is this concept? A strong tiger weighs about 2 to 300 kilograms, which is 5 to 600 kilograms, or 2 tons. 2,000 kilograms, a full 4,000 kilograms. If the density is the same, the volume is 6 or 7 times that of an adult tiger. Of course, it cannot be simply converted like this. To put it in perspective, the height of an adult tiger's back is about the same as Su Ming's belly button, and the height of an adult rhino's back is about the same as the height of Su Ming's nose. The two rhinos lying in the mud looked like two slightly smaller elephants. What a pity, Zhao Yun couldn't help but shook his head. A team of soldiers had prepared a large iron cage and urged the zoo staff to drive the rhino into the cage and take it away. My dear, take one last look at your Chinese rhinoceros, Ludmila said, crossing her arms. Who is your dear? Don't get involved, Su Ming glared, pointed at the rhinoceros below, and said confidently, they can't take the rhinoceros away. Zhao Yun, Nangong Huang, and others looked at Su Ming in confusion at the same time, while Ludmila sneered disdainfully and said, there is a saying in China that a dead duck has a tough mouth, which is very suitable for you now. Su Ming didn't bother to pay her any attention. He pointed downward and said, didn't you realize that these two rhinos are already dead? Following the direction of Su Ming's finger, the two great one-horned rhinoceros not far below remained motionless, as if they were indeed dead. In most Islamic sects, dead objects are unclean. If the two rhinos were really dead, these soldiers would never use any part of the dead rhinos to perform religious ceremonies. That would be blasphemous. Super Zoo. Author, Yin Seg Nian Bai. Chapter 472. After Su Ming said this, the attention of several people immediately shifted to the rhinoceros. Since the group of people appeared, the two of them have never moved in the mud. Even their tails are hanging behind them. They don't shake them from time to time to drive away flies as usual. My dear, are you crazy? Ludmila hummed and said, the weather is hot, of course the rhinoceros will not move. This can maintain physical strength and avoid unnecessary consumption. Our most elite soldiers in Moran can even lurk in the mud for 24 hours without moving. As they were talking, two staff members had already started to drive the rhinoceros away. They made a huge noise by the pool. The rhinoceros are actually very timid. After being frightened, they will run back to the cave, that is, the animal pen in the corner of the pool, where there is already a large iron cage waiting for them. Unexpectedly, the noise made the humans upset, but the two rhinoceroses below still turned a deaf ear and lay motionless. Huh? What's going on? Zhao Yun said curiously. Su Ming took the koala that was pulling Nangong Wang's hair into his arms, rubbed the little koala's neck like a godfather, squinted his eyes and smiled, and said, "It's dead. Adnan, tell those soldiers that I want dead rhinos too, but the price should be based on the price of pork, calculated by kilogram." Adnan bravely went over to the group of soldiers to convey Su Ming's words, but the other party did not take it seriously at all. The leading officer glared at this side fiercely. He, if you don't agree now, you won't even be able to sell at the price of pork later. Su Ming was not in a hurry at all. He pulled the little koala's two ears and made the little guy into a big letter. Koala. Seeing that the method of driving rhinos away with noise did not work, under the urging of a group of big-headed soldiers, the staff of Baghdad Zoo adopted several other methods, but the two rhinos still lay motionless in the mud, and had no reaction to various external stimuli. Just as Su Ming learned the knowledge from Zhao Yun, religions in the Middle East, including Islam and other sects, believe that dead things are unclean. Some radical sects even believe that after a person dies, the body is unclean and must be purified by fire or nature. If the two rhinos are really dead, they cannot be used for sacrifice unless these soldiers believe in some kind of evil cult. They will use the corpse for sacrifice. After more than an hour of struggling, the rhinoceros still did not move. The leading officer was completely uneasy. He raised his rifle, aimed slightly, and pulled the trigger. With a crisp sound, a bullet stuck to the body of a rhinoceros and drilled into the mud. If it was a living thing, it would definitely be scared. But the rhinoceros still lay there, letting the rain blow and hit it without moving. Ludmila was already 70% to 80% sure of Su Ming's words at this time, and asked in confusion, "How do you know they are dead?" "Nonsense, use your eyes to see, they are dead if they don't move," Su Ming said as a matter of course. Ludmila rolled her eyes in anger. "This is nonsense. If the rhino has not moved for 3 or 5 days, anyone would know that it is dead. But the problem is that they just arrived at the cement pool, and in less than 5 minutes, Su Ming has confirmed that the two rhinos are dead. This is too strange." At this time, the zoo technicians took out 2 tranquilizer guns and injected several shots at the rhinos outside the cement pool. They will anesthetize the rhinos, and then send technicians down to check the rhinos' vital signs with equipment to determine whether they are dead or alive, Zhao Yun said. "Well, I know," Su Ming nodded. "I was slightly nervous in my heart, hoping that I did not make a wrong judgment." After waiting for a while and confirming that the anesthetic had taken effect and the rhinos were unable to hurt people even if they were not dead, the 2 technicians took the equipment and, accompanied by a squad of soldiers, or escorted, entered the cement pool from the breeder channel and came to the rhinos. It was not known whether the rhino was really dead or because of the anesthetic. Until they came to the rhino and connected the equipment to the rhino's body, the rhino still did not move. Beep, beep. The detection equipment made a very faint sound, and some graphics that only professionals could understand were shaking up and down. The 2 technicians in charge of the detection were slightly stunned and exchanged glances with each other. Rhinos have a skill of playing dead. In the wild with harsh environment, rhinos often face the situation of lack of food and dry water sources. In this case, rhinos can enter the state of playing dead, lying in the mud for a long time without moving, slowing down their heartbeats, and reducing their body consumption to the minimum. In nature, many animals have similar abilities, such as hibernation, which is an extreme manifestation. Of course, rhinos are not hibernating. If there is danger approaching, rhinos will still be aware of it. From the instrument display, it seems that these 2 rhinos are not dead and are currently in this state. Due to anesthesia, their vital signs were much weaker than when they were playing dead. If not for professional instruments, normal people would see them as dead. The two technicians were full of questions. Why did the two rhinos suddenly enter this state? Although the food in the zoo was tight, it was not enough to starve them to death. Even in this state, the rhinos were very sensitive to external stimuli. Why did the rhinos not react to noise, gunshots, or even when they came to the rhinos? It was as if they knew someone was going to take them away and pretended to be dead. Despite this, the two technicians still made a decision at the first time. They turned back at the same time, shook their heads at the leading officer, and said in Arabic, "Confirmed dead." Seeing the scene outside the cement pool, Su Ming finally breathed a sigh of relief. He made the right bet. The two rhinos pretended to be dead. Su Ming had communicated with them in advance with his mental power. Even if the rhinos did not have the ability to play dead, Su Ming would make them motionless. He did not believe that these soldiers had the knowledge in this area and could see through the tricks. The only one who might be exposed was the staff of the zoo. As long as they used professional equipment to check, they would find that the rhinos were still alive. This is what Su Ming bet on. He was 80% sure that even if they found out, the other party would never tell this group of soldiers. It was a very simple truth. If they were in the same situation, if they were a staff member of the Baghdad Zoo, they would never want these soldiers to take the rhinos away. If not, they would rather give them to other zoos to raise than let them become victims of religion. Only those who are truly engaged in animal protection understand how precious these two rhinos are. Hearing what the technicians said, the leading officer's face instantly looked as ugly as if he had eaten feces. He stepped on the mud and walked to a rhino. He lay down and touched and listened to the rhino, but the rhino's skin was so thick, and it pretended to be dead and was shot with an anesthetic gun. He couldn't tell whether it was dead or alive. "Let's go," the officer waved his hand with a gloomy face and was about to leave with his soldiers. Su Ming just breathed a sigh of relief, and saw that the officer walked to the door of the keeper's passage, suddenly stopped, turned around, and strode back to the rhino. Su Ming's heart was lifted again. What is this guy going to do? The officer hesitated for 2 or 3 seconds, and suddenly took out a pistol, pointed it at the thigh of a rhino, and shot it. The bullet made a small hole in the rhino's thigh, and blood gushed out, but the rhino still lay there motionless. This time the leading officer finally gave up and left the cement pool with his men. The military discipline of this group of soldiers was better than Su Ming had imagined. Seeing that the rhino was really dead, they did not hold the body for a price, nor did they saw off the rhino's horn to sell for money. Under the leadership of the officer, a platoon of soldiers did not even look at Su Ming and his men, turned around and trotted out of the zoo. "Bastard, bastard, you still do this." "Fortunately, I have enough mental power," Su Ming cursed in his heart, and quickly divided his mental power to heal the rhino that was shot. The zoo staff below were busy stopping the bleeding of the rhino. The shot rhino suddenly stood up on the spot, screaming like crazy, and running around in the cement pool. The rhino was extremely depressed. This was really called being shot. Another rhino also staggered to get up, shook off the mud on its body, and took 2 steps. It felt dizzy and its legs became weak. It fell into the mud again. You are listening to Novels at Bless Up channel. Wish you happiness and luck. Please subscribe to receive new novels. How do you feel about this novel? Please like and leave a comment. Super Zoo. Author, Yin Seg Nian Bai. Chapter 473. Not long after the soldiers left, 2 dead rhinos suddenly came back to life, shocking everyone. The 2 Baghdad Zoo staff members in the cement pool, their hearts beating wildly, turned around and ran away without hesitation, screaming strangely and rushing into the keeper's passage. Although they knew that the 2 rhinos were not dead, how could they expect to survive? Are you still so lively? Being hit by a running rhinoceros is not a pleasant feeling. Pain is the best medicine against anesthesia. If an ancient Chinese escort accidentally inhaled the ecstasy, he would immediately cut himself on the thigh, using severe pain to stimulate the brain nerves and offset the sense of coma. This trick works well on any animal. The severe pain caused by the gunshot wound on the rhino's leg easily suppressed the anesthetic. Without Su Ming's mental power to suppress it deliberately, the shot rhinoceros shed tears of pain. Out. Eh? Didn't you say you were dead? By the cement pool, Ludmila and others were even more surprised. Suddenly, his eyes blurred as he saw a figure cross the fence and jump from the almost 3-meter-high fence into the cement pool. It was Su Ming. What are you going to do? Come up, Ludmila yelled anxiously. There were 2 rhinos in the cement pool, one of which was still under the influence of anesthesia, lying in the mud and twitching, gasping for air, not threatening at all. But the other guy who had been shot in the thigh was running around in the pool like crazy. Even the zoo's full-time technicians were so frightened that they hid in the cage. No matter how strong Su Ming's hands were, he was still in trouble. There is no meaning in front of the 2-ton rhinoceros. Is it possible that he can still shake hands with the rhinoceros? Su Ming paid no attention. As soon as Ludmila finished speaking, his feet had already landed on the soft grass below, his knees bent slightly, and he stood firm. Ouch, the rhinoceros discovered this foreign guy. It lowered its big head and pointed a horn like a stake at Su Ming, and rushed towards him like a small locomotive. Be careful, Ludmila yelled, and at the same time, she had a sand eagle hanging on her waist and was ready to kill the rhinoceros. In any case, the safety of customers' lives is more important. Calm down, Zhao Yun suddenly took action, held down Ludmila's gun hand and pressed it hard. With a bang, a bullet flew out diagonally, sparking a flash of light on the cement wall opposite, leaving a crater that could fit an egg into. At this time, the injured rhinoceros had rushed less than 2 meters away from Su Ming, but a shocking scene happened. The running rhinoceros suddenly braked suddenly and stopped charging. Putting back hard, the 4 iron pillar-like legs plowed the grass into 2 long furrows. The single horn on the big head stopped abruptly less than 20 centimeters in front of Su Ming's face. Su Ming stood motionless, with a normal expression on his face, looking calmly at the big rhinoceros horn that almost poked his head into a rotten watermelon, stopping a palm in front of him. Brother-in-law, you are so awesome, Nangong Huang yelled while lying on the cement pool. This guy's will is simply stronger than a professionally trained special forces soldier. Ludmila was shocked. Russian agents had a special training to train their mental endurance, which was very similar to the situation just now. Ludmila asked herself, if it were her, she would not be able to control the rhinoceros when it rushed within 1 meter of her face. Stop yourself from making dodge movements. Only Zhao Yun guessed it to 70% or 80%. Su Ming was probably not brave, but was frightened. Su Ming was really frightened. He jumped down to treat the rhinoceros at close range. The farther away he was, the worse the mental effect would be. Of course, he also had a little idea of pretending to be handsome in front of beautiful women. This little thought is common to all men. Who would have thought that the rhinoceros was too timid and was so frightened after being injured? When he saw Su Ming coming, he was a bit like a child who was bullied outside. When he saw his mother and father coming, he rushed towards him crying and shouting, which scared Su Ming silly. Fortunately, I just peed on the road, otherwise I would be scared to urinate. Su Ming angrily knocked on the rhino's head. If you hadn't stopped, wouldn't I have died unjustly? Forget it, it's important to treat its wounds first. Mental strength is not omnipotent. I turned around and yelled at the 2 technicians hiding in the breeder's passage, where is the medicine, where is the medicine? After a brief commotion, the injured great one-horned rhinoceros was finally treated. At first, the zoo's rescuers did not dare to approach until Su Ming stepped on the horn on the rhino's big head and climbed onto its back. The big rhinoceros not only did not make any offensive moves, but also lay down obediently. Only then did the other party walk out of the keeper's passage with the medicine, inexplicably frightened. The other rhino was not injured. It was only injected with an anesthetic and flushed with cold water for a while. It would recover on its own in more than an hour. The two people from the zoo kept chatting, and secretly glanced at Su Ming from time to time. Adnan said with admiration on his face, "Boss, they are talking about whether you used some magic on the rhino. You're in front of me, the rhinoceros is more obedient than the kitten." The same question was asked by Ludmila and Adnan. In front of everyone, the rhinoceros who met Su Ming for the first time actually showed extraordinary intimacy, which was completely beyond their imagination. "I told you a long time ago that my brother-in-law is the top expert in Huaxiazu. Nangong Huang despises this group of people. They are rare and strange and have never seen the world. If they go to Yangchuan City Zoo, will they be scared to death?" As he spoke, he curiously patted the skin of the big one-horned rhino. It felt hard to the touch. Because there was a layer of dried hard mud on the outside, it felt like touching a cement wall. Because of Su Ming, this group of people had the opportunity to observe the rhino up close. They all ran into the cement pool and surrounded the rhino. The injured but still clear-headed big one-horned rhino lay on its side in the mud, letting humans help it treat its gunshot wound. Its two dark little eyes also curiously looked at the group of people around it. While watching, it shed tears. The gunshot wound was too painful, and the rhino was a very timid animal. It was almost collapsed by the fear and pain. The koala was behind its butt, pulling the rhino's tail and crawling. This little guy seemed to love crawling, grabbing anything and crawling up. Ludmila was full of doubts. Now thinking back, from the beginning, Su Ming wanted to follow and take a last look at the rhino, as if he had anticipated everything that would happen next. It is impossible to say that Su Ming was secretly operating this. She has always been by Su Ming's side. At first, she was dozens of meters away from the two rhinos. Even a professional animal trainer could not affect the two rhinos that met for the first time. "Miss Ludmila, there are too many mysteries in the Chinese world that have been passed down for thousands of years that you cannot understand. Now is not the time to study this." Su Ming smiled mysteriously. "We should get to the point and talk to the zoo manager about the purchase of animals." Adnan once again showed the authority of a government worker, and said to the two technicians of the Baghdad Zoo in a domineering manner, "Go, call your director, the wealthy businessman from the East, the greatest animal trainer, my generous and handsome boss. I want to meet him." Soon, the head of the zoo, a skinny old man in a white robe, appeared in front of Su Ming. The Baghdad Zoo was in financial difficulties and had long intended to sell animals. In order to avoid further complications, the two sides began to negotiate the purchase at the fastest speed. At this moment, the soldiers of the platoon that had just left had returned to their base in a military vehicle, a checkpoint in the south of the city. As soon as the platoon leader walked into the small checkpoint, he saw a stretcher next to his camp bed. Basil, who had self-immolated on the plane, was wrapped in bandages and lay on the stretcher like a living mummy. "Emil, I've been waiting for you for hours, and you're finally back." Basil struggled to get up half of his body. The platoon leader was stunned. "Oh, dear Uncle Basil, didn't you go to the east to find the apostle of the god of fire? Why are you injured?" Super Zoo. Author, Yin Seg Nian Bai. Chapter 474. The platoon leader strode over, held Basil's hand, and said angrily, "Uncle Basil, tell me, who hurt you? Was it these beasts, or the Kurds who forgot their motherland? Although the love boys are few in number, they are all brave warriors. We will make them pay the price." It was an ordinary Baghdad man. Basil had no time to explain to the platoon leader, and struggled to sit up half of his body. "It doesn't matter who hurt me. I came to the city to find the apostle of the god of fire according to the instructions of your father, the priest Ali. What? The apostle of the god of fire appeared in Baghdad. Did my father get the oracle? The platoon leader repeated, with a strange expression, half shocked and half puzzled. Emil, your father has not been able to communicate with God for many years, so he asked the government for the 2 rhinos. I was on the plane back to Baghdad. Basil briefly told the platoon leader Emil what happened on the plane and later. Amir, there is only 1 week left before the deadline given by Is. We must find the Suman as soon as possible and find out whether he is the apostle of the god of fire. My legs and feet are not convenient now, so I can't notify all the low people in Baghdad one by one. You should quickly send your men to bring the information to other low people who are soldiers or doing business in the city, and mobilize everyone to find him, Basil said. Okay, I'll do it right away. Uncle Basil, what are the characteristics of that Oriental man? Amir immediately thought of the Orientals he met in the zoo in the afternoon, thinking that it wouldn't be such a coincidence. Oh, there are 3 of them, a middle-aged man and a young man. It is possible that Suman, the apostle of the god of fire, well, by the way, on the plane, although the flames did not hurt his skin, they burned a lot of his hair, and he shaved his head. Did he even shave his eyebrows? Amir asked in astonishment. Yes. Ah, Basil got up from the stretcher. The movement was so large that it involved the wound. He was sweating in pain and asked with a grin, how did you know? I just met him an hour ago, in the Baghdad Zoo. But he represents China, and the mother bear of the Russian Moran Group is still protecting him closely. Moran Group? This is very tricky, Basil frowned. Emil pondered for a moment, and a firm light flashed in his eyes. He said, since it is related to the messenger of the god of fire, I can't care so much. It's important to find the person first. After speaking, he stood up and turned to walk out of the checkpoint. His rapid but orderly command voice soon came from outside. Assemble. Everyone assemble. Deputy platoon leader, immediately contact all the low warriors stationed in Baghdad, including the 3rd Platoon of the 2nd Company of the 3rd Regiment of the 8th Infantry Division, the Chef Squad of the Logistics Department of the 1st Motorized Brigade, the Low Platoon of the 3rd Mountain Regiment. All low warriors immediately leave the battle sequence of the government army, take away all light and heavy weapons, and assemble at the east gate of the Baghdad Zoo within 30 minutes. Outside the checkpoint, figures flashed and military orders were sonorous. The director's office of the Baghdad Zoo. Su Ming used to think that his office was the lowest among the department-level cadres in the country. Now he knows that there are more people who are more frustrated than others. The director's office of the Baghdad National Zoo is just a big rough house without even air conditioning. There is a big electric fan that only appears in domestic beef ramen food stalls, which is buzzing around. Fortunately, the poorer it is, the smoother the business talks are. In less than 2 hours, the 2 sides have already agreed on the purchase. There are 225 animals in total, which is almost half of all the animals in Baghdad Zoo. They also include giraffes, pythons, crocodiles, and other large animals that Su Ming wanted before. Together, they are priced at $240,000. The other 2 rhinos are priced at $20,000 each. If they are placed on the international black market, these animals can be sold at several times the price, but no matter whether it is the identity of the leader of a state-owned zoo or his devout religious beliefs, the old man of the zoo will not sell the animals on the black market. In Su Ming's opinion, it is too cheap, so cheap that it is outrageous. Considering the purchases from 4 private zoos before, this trip only cost less than $350,000. After conversion, it is just over 2 million Chinese yuan, which is equivalent to more than 1/3 of the total number of animals in Yangchuan Zoo, excluding birds. Many of them are rare Middle Eastern specialty animals and large beasts in China. This deal is really a good deal. This is not just a matter of money. In addition to going to the black market, in other countries and regions, You can't buy so many protected animals even if you have money. Su Ming's identity also determined that he could not buy it on the black market. There is actually a historical reason for the low price. After the Americans withdrew from Iraq, there were only dozens of animals left in the Baghdad Zoo at that time. In order to show that the country was thriving, the newly formed Iraqi government ignored the carrying capacity of the Baghdad Zoo and forcibly added hundreds of new animals, making the zoo appear to be a false prosperity. Who would have thought that after a few years, the war would break out again, and the government had no time to take care of the zoo? It had not allocated funds to the Baghdad Zoo for half a year, and the cost of raising animals and the salaries of employees could not be paid. It urgently needed money. If a large number of animals were not sold, even with government funding, the Baghdad Zoo would be difficult to sustain. The old Arab director finally made a request that could only be bound by the conscience of both parties: if one day in the future, Iraq regains peace, I hope Su Ming can cooperate with the Baghdad Zoo to help them rebuild the zoo. I have to say that you are a wise old man. Just this request, the potential value in the future may exceed the hundreds of thousands of dollars, Ludmila said to the old director of Baghdad. The baptism of time has brought me not only physical aging, but also some insignificant wisdom. From this young man, I see a glimmer of hope for the future. The old director smiled. Okay, Mr. Director, let us solve the future things in the future. Now we have to go back to the hotel. Tomorrow morning, I will let Adnan communicate with the Ministry of Tourism to transport all the animals back to the country. Miss Ludmila, tonight I need you Moran International to provide 30 of the best mercenaries to guard the zoo to prevent accidents, Su Ming arranged. No problem, Ludmila nodded, took out the phone, and called Moran International back. At this moment, the roar of a car engine sounded outside the room, and several strong searchlights shone on the office windows. What's going on? Su Ming walked out of the door and saw that there were 7 or 8 military trucks parked around, and hundreds of Iraqi soldiers with live ammunition surrounded the office. Under the glaring light, the platoon leader who had left before stood at the front of the crowd. Beside him, 2 soldiers carried a stretcher with a mummy lying on it. Oh, it's him, the mummy roared. Super Zoo. Author, Yin Seg Nian Bai. Chapter 475. All the searchlights were focused on Su Ming. Su Ming was almost blinded by the flash, so he subconsciously raised his hand to block the light. I didn't understand what the mummy was saying, but the voice sounded very familiar, especially the hoarse scream, as if I'd heard it somewhere. Before Su Ming could realize who the mummy was, platoon leader Amir waved his hand, and a whole squad of soldiers rushed up with guns in hand, surrounding Su Ming. What are you going to do? With a loud shout, Lyudmila, a long-legged Eastern European girl, stepped out from behind and used her body to block Su Ming. She perfectly interpreted the professionalism of a bodyguard. She held down the pistol on her waist with one hand and used the other to block it. Without knowing how to move his hand, he easily knocked down an Iraqi soldier who was about to come over to Su Ming. Kak, ka, ka. There was a burst of dense gunfire sounds, and the two sides suddenly became at war with each other. Dozens of various gun muzzles were pointed at Ludmila. Ludmila showed no fear, but straightened up her original with a high chest. He yelled, "This is the Russian Moran Company, are you looking for death?" Captain Emil waved his hand, and the searchlight light gradually dimmed, keeping it at a level that could illuminate but not dazzle people. Miss Ludmila, even if the head of state of Russia is here, I must take him away today. Emil pointed at Su Ming. I'm sorry, this is related to the survival of our tribe. How dare you? Before Ludmila could finish her words, several spears were already pressed against her head from different directions. Stay in the room and don't move. Su Ming turned around and roared at Nangong Huang and Zhao Yun, who were about to rush out. Before he finished speaking, 2 soldiers grabbed his arms behind his back and pressed him in front of the mummy. You will pay the price for what happened today, Ludmila said through gritted teeth. Under her nose, the company's customers were kidnapped, which was tantamount to a severe slap in the face of Moran International. When he got closer, Su Ming saw the mummy's appearance clearly, and said doubtfully, "Is it you, the bearded, Basil? Oh, let go. Who allowed you to treat him so roughly?" Before the high priest finally confirmed Su Ming's identity, Basil did not dare to rashly say that Su Ming was the apostle of God in public, but after in his heart, he had already determined that they were inseparable. He struggled to climb off the stretcher, hugged Su Ming's calf, and kissed the muddy mountain boots. The whole audience was collectively dumbfounded. Especially on Su Ming's side, Ludmila and others did not expect such a huge reversal. The other party sent hundreds of people to surround the zoo. 1 second, Su Ming was the opponent's prisoner. The next second, the other party's boss actually kissed Su Ming's shoes. Who is this guy? Ludmila couldn't help but think about it. In the Arab world, kissing each other's boots is a very rare behavior, which is almost equivalent to worshipping gods. Nangong Huang felt a little nauseous. He had just witnessed Su Ming step into a pool of rhinoceros feces. Zhao Yun saw Basil's appearance clearly, and recalling the scene on the plane, he reluctantly let go of his worries. It seemed that the other party really regarded Su Ming as the god's apostle. In such a short period of time, not only would Su Ming be in no danger, but he would be treated with great courtesy. "Uncle Basil, we can't confirm his identity yet. Let's take him back to the tribe first," Emil said. Okay, tell the boys, don't hurt him, oh, and don't hurt his friends." They were gibbering, and Su Ming couldn't understand, so he turned back and looked at the two professional translators. The first time Adnan saw Basil, he hid in the corner of the room, trembling with fear. Now the enemy was on a narrow road. If he was caught by this guy, he might be killed on the spot. Ludmila said loudly, "They want to take you back to the tribe after that," she said to Emil in Arabic very seriously, "he is my employer. If you insist on taking him away, I must follow him together." Emil hesitated for a moment. Outsiders were generally not allowed to enter tribal settlements, let alone a foreigner. He needs a translator. "Take this woman with you," Basil said. "Let her come here." "No weapons allowed," Emil said solemnly. Ludmila snorted. She was a bachelor and understood that in this case, there was no point in playing tricks. A gun could not solve the problem, so she dropped the pistol on her waist and bent down again without waiting for the other soldier to search her body. He took out a dagger and a very compact pistol from his military boots, took out a saber from his sleeve, and patted his waist to indicate that all weapons were disarmed. Emil nodded, and two soldiers escorted Ludmila to Su Ming's side. Brother-in-law. Brother-in-law. I'll go with you." Nangong Huang finally couldn't bear it anymore and rushed out of the room with Koala in his arms, looking angry and sad. Suddenly several guns were pointed at him. "Uncle Zhao, stop him, you must not come," Su Ming frowned and yelled. Under such circumstances, it would be useless if Nangong Huang and Zhao Yun were taken away again. To put it bluntly, if he was in trouble, what happened, there was no one to report it. Nangong Huang was used to listening to Su Ming's words, so he stopped where he was and glared at the soldiers in front of him. "Nangong Huang, don't be impulsive." Zhao Yun stood up with a stern face and patted him on the shoulder. Su Ming said to Emil, "I want to say a few words to my friend." 3 minutes, Emil looked at his watch. "Uncle Zhao, I have something to tell you," Su Ming said. Zhao Yun walked through the crowd and came to Su Ming. Su Ming said in Yangchuan city dialect, "Uncle Zhao, they regard me as some kind of apostle. There is no danger for the time being. After I leave with them, you can go find me immediately. The embassy, the Iraqi government, and Moran International are all here to help. Also, help me take care of Nangong Huang. Oh, don't tell my mother and Nangong Yan just yet, so they won't worry." Zhao Yun said, I understand, you should be careful and don't fight with these religious people. I have some connections with the upper echelons of the country and will do my best to rescue you. You must persevere. Seeing Zhao Yun's sad face, Su Ming smiled and comforted him and said, Uncle Zhao, don't act like I'm going to die. I'm not kidnapped by terrorists. I'm an apostle of God. You kid, should I say that you are heartless, or are you so heroic? Zhao Yun was also a person who was used to seeing strong winds and waves. The look of sadness on his face disappeared, he patted his shoulder and said seriously, wait for us. Let's go, let's make it look like a Kaianyao romance drama. Su Ming waved his hand and grinned. You are listening to Novels at Bless Up channel. Wish you happiness and luck. Please subscribe to receive new novels. How do you feel about this novel? Please like and leave a comment. Super Zoo. Author, Yin Seg Nian Bai. Chapter 476. Several military vehicles filed out, and Zhao Yun and Nangong Huang immediately contacted the local government and the Chinese embassy through the zoo's phone number. Not long after, two armed off-road vehicles of the same model as those driven by Ludmila roared in front of them. The difference is that the roofs of these two vehicles have been removed, revealing the ferocious heavy machine guns on them. The vehicles are filled with heavily armed Moran mercenaries with camouflage on their faces. What's going on? Where's Ludmila? A mercenary man jumped out of the car. Zhao Yun was about to explain when a red flag car with the Chinese national flag also drove into the zoo. A middle-aged civil servant with eyes stepped out of the car and introduced himself with his embassy ID. After a while, and then together with Moran's mercenaries, they listened to Zhao Yun tell the whole story. Zhao Yun was very eloquent and quickly explained the cause and effect of the matter clearly. Moran's mercenaries were furious, these damn Iraqi soldiers, we came to help them fight IS and the Kurds, but they actually dared to capture Ludmila. This is not an act of the Iraqi government forces, but of the Lul tribe. The civilian official of the embassy said solemnly, I hope all parties will remain calm for the time being. I will go back immediately to seek instructions from Comrade Ambassador. The Lul tribe? Oh no, I don't know what the Lul tribe is. This must be done by IS, and it can only be done by IS. Chekhov, call and tell the guys at the headquarters, they can finally find an excuse, sending more manpower to Iraq and expanding operations. Oh, I think Mr. President will also be happy to hear this news. The Russian bombers have been hungry for a long time. After saying that, the mercenary leader jumped on the armed off-road vehicle, waved his hand, and shouted, the rest of you, follow me. We can't let the Iraqis kidnap Russian women in front of a group of Russian men, regardless of them what kind of bullshit is la or is. Besides, that daughter is still our leader. Moran's mercenaries screamed and raised their guns, and the armed off-road vehicles came and went in a hurry, then roared away and drove out of the zoo. You two comrades, please go back with us. Don't worry, although we are not as flamboyant as these Russian mercenaries, when it comes to the safety of our citizens, Mr. Ambassador will take it seriously. The civilian official raised his eyes and revealed with a smile, coincidentally, our government is currently negotiating with the Iraqi government on the equity distribution of 2 oil wells. Okay, Zhao Yun got into the car of the civil servant of the Chinese embassy. I want to make some calls to the province and the capital, and I hope to use your confidential line. What about me? Adnan, who had escaped, caught up and asked, leaning against the car window. Do what you should do. If my brother-in-law comes back and finds that these animals did not successfully board the transport plane to China, you will be dead, Nangong Huang threatened fiercely while holding the koala. A total of 8 military vehicles left Baghdad and headed north. After a few hours, the road became bumpy and seemed to have entered the mountains. We should enter the Zagros Mountains in the north, which is the hometown of the Lu people for generations. To the west of the mountains is the area controlled by IS, and to the north is the territory of the Kurds. Ludmila held onto the people in the carriage with one hand. Holding the handle to prevent him from being knocked off the car, he frowned and asked Su-ming, "Who are you and why did they kidnap you?" "They think I am the apostle of the fire god they worship, and by the way, the savior who has been sleeping at the bottom of the lake for 3,000 years." Su-ming shrugged. "What? God's envoy? Savior? You?" Ludmila simply thought she heard wrong, just because of this bullshit reason. "Don't I look like me?" Su-ming touched his bald head and tried his best to look like a magician. "Then I am the Virgin Mary." Ludmila gestured her middle finger at Su-ming in a very ungraceful manner. "Hee, I don't think so either," Su-ming said. Although the journey was very bumpy, Su-ming still felt sleepy in waves in the middle of the night. As a female mercenary who often lived overnight, Ludmila remained awake both mentally and physically. State, dutifully acting as a bodyguard, watching vigilantly a squad of fully armed soldiers in the carriage. Su-ming was not too embarrassed at first, so he just leaned on Ludmila's shoulder and took a nap. Later, he felt too sleepy and fell asleep directly on her lap. How can he sleep in this situation? Doesn't he know it's dangerous? Damn it, why do you have to drool while sleeping? Ludmila was speechless and had to put one arm around Su-ming to prevent him from being the bumpy military vehicle was thrown out of the carriage. If a client was not killed by the enemy, but was thrown out of the carriage and fell to death, Ludmila would almost be able to end her mercenary career. Therefore, when the first ray of sunshine in the morning entered the car and Su-ming opened his eyes, he saw Ludmila's angry face. Hiss. Su-ming took a sip of the saliva that was about to flow out, touched his mouth, looked at the large wet stains on Ludmila's camouflage pants, and smiled. Sorry, that's what's wrong with me. When you get back, I'll give you a new pair of pants, no, a new set, including underwear and outerwear, all from famous brands. You can go back and talk about it later. Don't blame me for not warning you. Any tribe with faith will have extremely severe punishment for those who pretend to be gods. Direct killing is the gentlest method, Ludmila said. Will you protect me? Su-ming approached and asked shamelessly. I will fulfill the responsibilities and obligations of a mercenary, but do you think it will be useful? Ludmila nodded at a squad of fully armed soldiers in the carriage and whispered, you'd better find a way as soon as possible. While speaking, the military vehicle stopped, and Emil and Basil appeared outside the car. Mr. Su, we are here, please get off the car, I will take you to see my father, the High Priest Ali. Su-ming and Ludmila jumped out of the car. In front of them was a valley surrounded by mountains on three sides. They were now on the hillside, looking down from a high place. There was actually a human village of not small size in the valley, or it would be more appropriate to say a town, with many wooden houses scattered around, enough for several thousand people to live. Under the morning sun, wisps of smoke rose from the roofs of the village. Led by the soldiers, Su-ming and Ludmila walked into the tribe where the Lur people had lived for generations. They saw along the way that the lifestyle of the Lur people was not as backward as that of the primitive people in the African tribes. It was very similar to some remote mountain villages in China, and some modern equipment that had long been eliminated could be seen. But the most common weapons were guns. Almost every adult man in the tribe carried a rifle behind him. Please come in, the high priest is waiting for you inside. Basil and Emil stopped at the same time in front of a dome-shaped wooden house in the center of the tribe. Su-ming was about to take Ludmila inside, but Emil stopped Ludmila and said expressionlessly, only he can go in alone. No, I have the responsibility to protect him, and I can act as an interpreter, Ludmila said. My father is a very knowledgeable man and does not need an interpreter. In addition, this is the territory of our Lur people. If my father wants to hurt him, you can't do anything, Emil said. Ludmila's face sank, and she was about to get angry. Okay, Emil, don't worry about my safety. In the territory of the Lur people, a foreign woman can't harm the Lur people's high priest. A somewhat old but gentle voice came from the room, let the two guests come in. Super Zoo. Author, Yin Seg Nian Bai. Chapter 477. The language used by the old man in the room was actually Chinese. Although the accent was weird and the pronunciation of many words was not standard, Su Ming could barely understand it. After opening the door curtain and before entering the room, a wave of heat hit his face, and Su Ming couldn't help but frown. On a hot day, this small wooden house was already very stuffy, but at this time, a bonfire was lit on the ground in the middle of the wooden house, roasting the entire wooden house like a big steamer. An old man in white clothes with a face full of faces was sitting by the campfire. Without realizing it, he stretched out his skinny hand and waved at Su Ming. Su Ming walked into the room bravely, and Ludmila also followed in with a frown. Two friends from the east, I am Melik Ali of the Lo people. You can also call me the patriarch and high priest. Welcome to the hometown of the Lo people. Young Easterners, don't be too surprised. People live too long, and they have enough time to learn various languages. I have been yearning for the mysterious East since I was young. When I was 35 years old, I even visited your capital. The taste of fried noodles, it is still unforgettable to me. The old man nodded slightly and motioned for the two of them to sit down opposite the fire. Su Ming was already sweating on his forehead as soon as he walked in. Hearing the old man talk about fried noodles, he suddenly felt a sense of intimacy. He wiped the sweat from his forehead, took off his shirt, and took off the kettle that was always hanging on his waist. Sat down at the farthest place from the fire, shirtless, and asked with a grin on his face, "Priest Ali, let's get straight to the point. What on earth do you want me to do here? Let's get straight to the point." Ali probably didn't understand the meaning of this idiom, but he understood the next sentence and said, "The Lure people are walking at the fork of destiny. We need guidance from the gods." According to Basil said, "You are probably the apostle of Vulcan." Hearing this, Ludmila pursed her lips in disdain, with a look on her face that looked like a magician. Su Ming did not deny it directly, but carefully asked tentatively, "Old man Ali, I want to know, what would happen if I was not the apostle you call me?" "Whether you are an apostle or not is not decided by you, but by God's will," Ali said with a smile. Su Ming just wanted to slap him with big-eared melon seeds. According to what he said, it doesn't matter whether he admits it or not. If their God says he is, then he is. If their God says he is not, then he is not. The problem is, God can't speak, and it's not up to him, the high priest, to decide. In this case, Su Ming was willing to risk everything. He did not want to follow the ideas of these religious fanatics. If he followed their ideas, he would definitely be very passive. Now he has no idea what the other party is thinking. The only thing Su Ming can be sure of is that he must follow his own ideas and let the other party follow his own thoughts. One is active and the other is passive, the two have absolutely different meanings. The apostle of God is not so easy to fake. If he admits it rashly, the other party may be polite to him at first, but if he is exposed, he will be in big trouble. On the contrary, if you are unwilling to admit it smoothly, it is at most because the other party has found the wrong person, and the two parties will not form irresolvable hatred. And since the other party has found him, he has already preconceived the idea that he is an apostle. Even if he does not admit it, the other party may not believe it in a short time. In this way, he can delay time and wait for rescue. Thinking of this, Su Ming said directly, "I made it very clear to Basil on the plane. I am just an Eastern businessman. I am not yet 25 years old. I am not the apostle you call me." Before Ali could speak, to retort, he touched a handful of sweat beads on his head, shook his hand, and shook the water stains all over the ground, saying, "If I am the apostle of the god of fire, why am I so afraid of heat?" Ludmila nodded along. She was also extremely hot, and she was sweating more than Su Ming, dripping down her camouflage uniform like water. If the apostle of Vulcan is so afraid of heat, how can he be good friends with Vulcan? But I heard from Basil that you are not afraid of fire, Ali said. Listen to his nonsense. You know better than me who Basil is. That guy dares to burn himself. He obviously has something wrong with his brain, Su Ming said as he put his hand close to the fire, still far away from the flames. When he was only 10 centimeters away, he retracted his hand due to the burn. Look, I'm also afraid of getting burned. Ayala stared at Su Ming for a few seconds, with a hint of doubt in her eyes. Can you sit here? I want to see you up close. Ayala pointed to a position opposite him and closer to him. Su Ming looked puzzled. Could this old man be interested in me? What kind of weird taste is this? There is such a beautiful girl like Ludmila, but he doesn't even look at it. He insists on seeing me as a man? Is it because you are too old? After glancing at Ludmila, Ludmila nodded slightly, indicating that at this distance, she could guarantee Su Ming's safety. Su Ming then sat on the seat designated by Ali. There was a small cushion there. It was made of who knows what material and it was soft to sit on. Look, how do I look like an apostle of the god of fire? Old man, I think it's better for you to let both of us go. One of us is Russian and the other is Chinese. We are both well-known people in China. You don't need to offend the two big countries in the East at the same time for an illusory reason. We Chinese have good tempers, and their old President Putin is not a good person. When the time comes, send a few formations of bombers to flatten this small village in minutes. Then there will be no need for God to guide you on the road, right? When Su Ming was talking, Ayala kept looking at him with cloudy eyes, and nodded frequently from time to time, as if she was seriously considering Su Ming's words. But as he was talking, Su Ming felt something was wrong. It was getting hotter and hotter under his butt. He just noticed this and was about to stand up. The mat under his butt suddenly caught fire, like a volcanic eruption, and the flames suddenly jumped up high. A ball of blazing fire instantly wrapped Su Ming in it. Damn it, Ludmila roared. She would never have thought that Ali had set a trap for Su Ming to sit here. The cushion was a flammable material that would spontaneously combust. She subconsciously slapped the flames on Su Ming's body, but as soon as her hand touched the fire, she shrank back because of the burn. I'll kill you, Ludmila was furious and pounced on Ali like a mother bear. Hearing the movement in the room, Emil and another soldier who were guarding the door immediately rushed into the wooden house, with the black muzzle of the gun against the back of Ludmila's head, and roared, "Stop!" Ludmila's hand had already pressed down Ali's head. As long as she exerted force, she could break his neck. But with two guns pointing at her, she could only let go of her hand in hatred. Damn lure people, this is an unreasonable murder, Ludmila roared angrily. Cough, cough, cough. Ali sat up again, coughing violently, but he didn't even look at Ludmila, staring at the flame. The room was almost half closed, without windows. The bonfire in the room consumed most of the oxygen, and Su Ming was only wearing shorts, with nothing to burn, so the flames rose quickly and went out quickly. It took only 3 or 4 seconds for the flames to burn out. After the flames disappeared, Su Ming was sitting there in astonishment, stunned. His whole body was burned naked again. Division. Kidian has changed its version again. I almost peed when I logged into the website. Super Zoo. Author, Yin Seg Nian Bai. Chapter 478. The flames rose without warning, and the raging fire enveloped Su Ming in an instant, but quickly extinguished. Ludmila saw the flames and rushed forward to hold Ali's neck. At the same time, Emil, who was guarding the door, rushed in. From the beginning to the end, within only 4 or 5 seconds, the flames had suddenly faded. Su Ming was naked and sat there with a blank look on his face. There was a deathly silence in the wooden house for an instant. Ludmila's face was still angry, and she kept her curse words just now, but her blue eyes were full of disbelief, staring blankly at Su Ming. Emil and another Le soldier held their guns against Ludmila's head, but their eyes seemed to be attracted by a magnet, looking at Su Ming firmly. Priest Alayi even forgot to cough. His hands could not help but tremble. He slowly raised his hands and wanted to touch Su Ming's face, but he seemed to be afraid of blaspheming Su Ming and did not dare to get close. Even the air seemed to be stagnant, and only the bonfire remained in the wooden house, with the occasional crackle or two of dry wood exploding. My uncle. In the end, Su Ming was the first to break the calm. The expression on his face changed from confusion to anger. He jumped up with his bare buttocks, like an angry beast, and pounced on the old man Alayi, facing his withered face. He was punched hard in the face. With a bang, the old man was beaten until his mouth was full of blood, and he fell backwards. Su Ming was like crazy, unwilling to let go, and he was riding on him and throwing wild punches. Zinema, the whole family, you old dog to death. Beating and scolding at the same time. At this time, I realized that Su Ming actually had little education. His curse words were very monotonous. They all had the same meaning except for and suck. It can be seen that reading more books is still beneficial. For example, when they see a group of waterbirds being frightened from the reeds at sunset, an educated person thinks, the sunset and the solitary owl fly together, and the autumn water makes the sky one color. People like Su Ming, who only have a bachelor's degree, think semi-illiterate. All I can think about is there are so many birds, they are so beautiful. The fire just now really frightened Su Ming. Alayi asked him to sit over, but Su Ming was actually on guard. Alayi was old and thin. Su Ming estimated that he could deal with him if he really took action, not to mention that Ludmila, a female bear, was watching eagerly from the side. No one would have thought that Alayi would play such a dirty trick and actually play tricks on the seat. The cushion under his butt was probably the kind of flammable object that Basil played with on the plane. The moment the fire started, Su Ming had no defense at all. It was so electric. Looking back, I just walked through the gates of hell. If it weren't for the fear of death, seeing so many Iraqi soldiers with guns at the zoo, I would have added 2 rhinoceros leather energy storage balls to the tank to stop bullets at critical moments without hesitation. If it is not summer, but winter, and I am wearing a cotton coat. If my reaction had been just a moment slower, or if I had worn a little thicker underpants, and hadn't noticed something was wrong under my butt just before the fire started, I would have broken the rhinoceros energy storage ball without hesitation, and formed 2 in vitro a thick layer of rhinoceros leather psychic armor. If there is flammable material under the butt, it will burn just a few seconds longer. If any of the above is true, then even if Su Ming is not roasted into a roasted suckling pig today, he will still be roasted half rare like Basil. In such a remote mountainous area where there is little medical treatment, this is worse than death. Point. Moreover, Su Ming was sitting cross-legged just now, and the area where the flames rose was so terrible that it almost turned little Su Ming into a grilled sausage. Oh, and there are 2 fried eggs to take away. Another cup of Stocking's milk tea. How can he get a breakfast? After the flames were extinguished, Su Ming recovered from the shock. These images flashed through his mind, and he was filled with fear. Cold sweat poured out. These damn religious fanatics are simply treating people like they are not human beings. If it were an ordinary person sitting here, he would be dead now. Su Ming went crazy, punching Alayi one after another with red eyes. Alayi, the high priest of the Le tribe, did not show extraordinary magical powers like in fantasy novels. He was just an old man. In addition to having more wisdom than young people, he was not as physically fit as he was in the fantasy novels. He didn't have any advantage, but was very weak. He was punched a few times by Su Ming. His nose and face were bruised and swollen. One of his burnt yellow front teeth was broken, and he made a sound of in pain. It was only then that Emil and another soldier came to their senses. One of them pointed a gun at Su Ming and shouted, Emil strangled Su Ming's neck with his arm from behind and pulled him away from Ali. Su Ming used his hands and feet, and then kicked Ali's thigh hard, causing Ali to shrink into a hero in pain. Ludmila's eyes flashed, and she was about to take action. When another soldier saw that something was not going well, he yelled loudly, retreated to the corner, pulled the gun bolt, and pointed at Ludmila. Whoops, the curtain of the wooden house was opened again, and several soldiers rushed in from the outside. Upon seeing this, they raised their guns at the same time. "What's wrong with you, High Priest? The evil pagan dares to harm the High Priest." The grumpy soldier raised his rifle butt and was about to hit Su Ming and Ludmila's heads. "Stop. Wait a minute." Two voices sounded at the same time. One voice came from Emil, and the other voice was weak and leaky, coming from Ali. The butt of the gun stopped in mid-air, and the young man of the Luar tribe looked at the respected high priest and the most powerful warrior in the tribe, Brother Amir, in surprise. Ali struggled to get up from the ground and wiped the blood from the corner of his mouth. Seeing that Amir was still strangling Su Ming's neck with his arm, he glared at him fiercely, "Don't let go." Amir slowly let go of his hand, looked at Su Ming with a complicated expression, subconsciously moved his feet, and used half of his body to block between his father and Su Ming, fearing that Su Ming would hurt his father again. "Get out of the way." Ali pushed Amir away, crawled at Su Ming's feet, and said in a trembling voice, "Messenger who walked out of the flames, please forgive my offense to you. Ali, the most loyal servant of God, is willing to accept all punishments." The few Luar soldiers who rushed in did not see the scene just now, and had no idea what happened. Hearing Ali say this, several people looked at each other, but they all subconsciously lowered the muzzle of the gun and dared not point the gun at Su Ming again. However, Emil and a soldier before him saw Su Ming being burned by the flames, but he was safe and sound. They looked at each other, took off their guns from their shoulders at the same time, and crawled towards Su Ming. Ludmila's mouth opened wider, and a fist could be stuffed in it. "So, I can beat you at will." Su Ming clenched his fist and grinned at Ali. You are listening to Novels at Bless Up channel. Wish you happiness and luck. Please subscribe to receive new novels. How do you feel about this novel? Please like and leave a comment. Super Zoo. Author, Yin Seg Nian Bai. Chapter 479. Su Ming was just venting his anger. He was not so cruel as to beat an old man to death, even though the old man deserved to die. The fear just now had passed, and Su Ming's mind had basically recovered. In the territory of the Luar people, beating their patriarch and high priest to death would be very difficult even if he was a real apostle. Besides, his apostle was a fake. Damn it, what's wrong with you? You always burn yourself or others, Su Ming said angrily. The old man Ali waved his hand. Emil, take the boys out. Father. Emil looked at Su Ming with some worry. However, his attitude at this time was completely different from the initial one. Not only did he not dare to raise his gun to scare, he did not even dare to say a word of threat. Enough. Are you going to continue to blaspheme the apostle of God? The old man was missing a front tooth, and his voice was leaking, which sounded quite funny. Please forgive my disrespect. If you have any punishment, Emil is willing to bear it alone. Please don't hurt my elderly father again. Emil's voice was trembling. He saluted Su Ming, then led a group of soldiers to face Su Ming, bent over, and backed out of the wooden house. Respected. Wait, let's find a doctor to see you first. Su Ming directly waved his hand and interrupted Ali's words. He was furious and hit hard just now. Not only was the old man's front teeth broken, his face was covered with blood, and there was a big gap. It looked like another mouth had grown on his face, and it was bleeding continuously. Su Ming didn't want the old man to die from excessive blood loss while he was talking. He really couldn't explain it. Thank you for your kindness. I am a witch doctor myself. Uh, cough cough. The old man bent over and moved a small wooden barrel from the corner of the room with great effort. He grabbed a handful of mud-like things from the barrel and touched the wound on his face. The mud didn't stink, it smelled like some kind of herb. Taking advantage of the opportunity given by the old man to heal her, Ludmila couldn't hold back her curiosity and asked Su-ming, "What happened just now? Was the flame fake?" "But I could feel the scorching heat from more than a meter away." "Nonsense, of course it's real." "How about you try it next time?" Su-ming rolled his eyes. "What's going on?" Ludmila reached out her hand curiously and touched Su-ming's chest and back. It felt like ordinary skin, so why was it safe and sound in the flames? With a pop, Ludmila even slapped Su-ming's bare butt. "Be careful to be reported for sexually harassing customers." Su-ming squeezed his legs together, covered the mosaic part with his hands, and said awkwardly, "Can you please find me a set of clothes now, at least pants? Ask them, you are their messenger of God, even if you want their most beautiful girl, they will satisfy you." "But how did you do it? Is there really the legendary Chinese Qigong?" Ludmila's curiosity was completely ignited. "I'm too lazy to pay attention to them," Su-ming said. Ludmila looked around and found that there was nothing in the room that could cover her body, so she took off her camouflage jacket and handed it to Su-ming. "Cover it first." Su-ming took it and wrapped it around his waist, covering the exposed parts below the waist. At the same time, he couldn't help but look at Ludmila twice more. She was only wearing a tight short training vest under her coat that covered her private parts, which clearly showed the curve of her upper body. The two tall and straight flesh mountains on her chest were about to burst out, and on her half-exposed lower abdomen, there were several angular abdominal muscles, and two standard vest lines on both sides of her waist brought out almost perfect lines. "Nice figure," Su-ming whistled. The two of them were now grasshoppers on the same rope, in the same enemy camp, and naturally became comrades in the same trench. The little grudge of the previous handshake had long disappeared without a trace. Ludmila deliberately puffed out her chest, pursed her lips and blew a kiss to Su-ming, and said with charming eyes, "You are also very good. Let's go on a date after we leave here." Ah, Su-ming was caught off guard by this foreign girl who could switch between fierce mother bear and charming mother bear at any time. He almost reacted. He arched his butt backwards and laughed dryly, "I have a girlfriend and I am getting married." "So what? Married men know how to make women happy." Ludmila shrugged her shoulders. A very ordinary action brought about a turbulent wave, and the snow-white light dazzled Su-ming. Cough cough cough. The old cough brought the two back to normal. Ali's half-face was covered with mud and herbs, looking like a savage. He bowed and said, "Respected envoy of God." "Wait," I said, "I'm not an envoy of God." Even Su-ming himself felt that the statement was not convincing. There are acrobatics that play with fire in the East and the West, and it is not surprising that they can be burned by flames without any harm. However, whether it is acrobatics or magic, there must be time for preparation in advance, either to do something with the body or to do something in the flames. Su-ming was caught directly from the zoo, and the flames just now suddenly appeared without any warning, leaving him no chance to do anything. Therefore, in the eyes of the Luo tribe's high priest, who had been worshipping gods for thousands of years and hoped that the fire god Mazda would come to save them, there was only one possibility for Su-ming to be safe in the flames. "At least don't call me a messenger of God all the time." "I'm scared." Su-ming was 8 feet away from him, fearing that this guy would do something dirty again. Now he didn't have a fireproof energy storage ball on him. Speaking of things related to God, Ali regained some wisdom, with his big front teeth bared, and said with a piercing voice, "Okay, I'll call you sir for now. You always say you're not a messenger of God. How do you prove it?" Su-ming almost spit it out, pointing at his nose. "I'm not a messenger of God, do I need to prove it? There are billions of people in the world, Do I have to prove that I'm not a messenger of God one by one? Yes, there are billions of people in the world, but you are the only one who can walk out of the flames safely. Ali showed a witty smile, and you have proved this more than once. Maybe next time, I will be burned to death. Su Ming deliberately took a shot of vaccination. He didn't want to be on guard against being burned by fire all the time. No, there will never be a next time. God will show his power and let those who believe in him find the right path. But God's power is not to show off, let alone doubt. God has given lure people 2 hints. If I still don't believe it, it would be disrespectful to God. Ali stroked his chest and said. It seems that I have decided to be the messenger of God. I can't deny it. Su Ming forced a bitter smile on his face. However, this bitter smile was just for Ali to see. He couldn't take the initiative to admit that he was the messenger of God, which would lead to a series of passivity in the later period, and even suspicion and constant tests, but being surrounded by a group of religious fanatics, he was almost burned to death. If he wanted to ensure his own safety and even recover his capital, the best way was to let the other party take the initiative to believe that he was the messenger of God. But didn't Emil say that Mazda's apostles came out of ice springs and flames? Just because you are not afraid of fire, it doesn't mean you are a messenger of God, right? Ludmila suddenly said. Su Ming wanted to pinch this big-breasted girl. Why are you talking about the ice spring? Has your brain grown into your chest? As expected, Ali nodded. Yes, you have demonstrated the power of fire. Then, according to the records of the Holy Book, I will arrange for you to perform the ice spring ceremony. Super Zoo. Author, Yin Seg Nian Bai. Chapter 480. Su Ming was dumbfounded, and Ludmila knew she had said the wrong thing, so she was also dumbfounded. The two of them stared at each other. The trouble comes from the mouth. What kind of bicycle do you want? What kind of ice spring are you talking about? It's okay now, one wave has not subsided, and another wave has arisen. It's truly a song of ice and fire. A fire ritual almost killed me, and now there's an ice spring ritual that I don't know what it is. Literally guessing, since the flames are burned with fire, is the ice spring stuffed with cold spring water? If you successfully pass the ice spring ceremony, you can be sure that you are an apostle of the great fire god, Ali said. This. Su Ming swallowed and asked tentatively, what does the ice spring ceremony mean? Of the 3 energy storage balls in his body, 2 of them have been used up for special purposes, leaving only 1 mental power storage ball and almost full mental power. If he encounters flames or is flooded, he was completely helpless. Judging from the fire that suddenly broke out just now, this ice spring ceremony will definitely not be a good one. If it cannot be passed, 80% of the life will not be saved. Mortals cannot reveal God's test. Even if you are God's messenger, you should not know it in advance. That would be disrespectful to God, Ali said with a stern look on his face. However, I believe you can pass the test smoothly. Su Ming simply wanted to punch him to death, so he held back his anger and said, Ali, if I failed the ice spring test, but passed the fire test just now, how do you explain it? Could it be that the god of fire had a fight with you? Joke. If Ali was a philosopher full of speculative thoughts, this question would be enough to make him think hard. However, religious fanatics have the advantage of fanatics. For problems that cannot be figured out, they can be attributed to God. Although the ice spring test is very dangerous, I firmly believe that you can pass the test. As long as you have full confidence in the great Vulcan, you will definitely be able to pass it. Ali sometimes looks like a religious lunatic, but sometimes he shines with the light of a wise man. Before Su Ming could get angry, he said slowly, your biggest problem now is that you have no confidence in yourself and the god of fire. If I'm not wrong, you don't even believe in the existence of Vulcan, let alone the identity of the divine envoy. Su Ming snorted noncommittally. Ali smiled and said, this is normal. Everything that seems to be a coincidence has an invisible hand manipulating it behind the scenes. This is the power of God. God has arranged everything. Mortals are like lost lambs and cannot understand God's intention, so God sent a messenger to lead the lambs towards the kingdom of God. As a sacrifice, what I need to do is to find this messenger, and as a messenger, what you need to do is to have full confidence in God. Maybe you still can't understand everything that happened to you, but it did happen, didn't it? When one day, you complete your mission and step into the kingdom of God, you will suddenly understand that all of this is God. It's been arranged long ago. Huh? It sounds like it makes sense. Su Ming was almost lame after being deceived by this old bastard, and he actually started to believe him. Seeing Su Ming's thoughtful look, Ali showed a relieved smile. Haha, you can rest first. I'll take my leave. If you need anything, you can tell the guard at the door. Of course, before the ceremony, you and your friends, you can't leave here, and you can't communicate with the outside world. Please forgive me. After 2,000 years, the Lure people finally saw hope, and I have to be cautious. After Ali finished speaking, he left the wooden house tremblingly. Hey, can you tell me now how to prevent fire? Ludmila asked Su Ming in a low voice. Wait, I want to be quiet. Su Ming ignored Ludmila, waved his hand, and lowered his head in thought. Jing Jing. Is that the name of your Chinese fiancé? Ludmila puffed out her chest and said hummingly. Ah, Su Ming looked up at her in confusion. After Ali left, someone quickly brought food and water, and even put out the bonfire in the wooden house at Su Ming's request. Lighting a bonfire in the house was like taking a sauna, and it was impossible to think. The food was quite rich, but Su Ming really had no intention of eating and kept thinking about Ali's words. There is a saying in the East that there is God's will in the dark, and there is also a saying in fatalism. The outcome of a person's life is already determined when he is born. All actions in life are just getting closer to this goal. There are so many people in the world, why do you have the ability to be an animal friend? With friends of animals, why come to a Yangchuan city zoo that is about to close down? I didn't plan to come to the Middle East, but due to a series of small changes, I came by accident. Even Su Meng's injury happened very strangely. If he had brought Su Meng here, he wouldn't have hired bodyguards at all, and maybe he wouldn't have encountered the following incidents. Even on the plane, Su Meng could easily take down the self-immolated Basel without taking any action himself. Could it be that there really is a god of fire, arranging all this in the dark? Su Ming refused to eat, but Ludmila was not polite at all. As an agent, she was not picky about the taste of food at all. As long as she could eat it without dying, she could eat it. After devouring his portion, he wiped his mouth and asked Su Ming, "Do you still want to eat your portion? If not, give it to me." Without waiting for Su Ming to answer, she took the plate directly, grabbed it with her hands and stuffed it into her mouth, her cheeks bulging. Su Ming's eyes were wide open. He knew more than one or two beautiful women, including a nurse, a pretty policewoman, a strong woman, a beautiful cook, and his own legitimate female reporter. They all had their own characteristics, but it was the first time he met a girl like Ludmila who was so heartless and didn't care about her image at all. However, Ludmila's carefree style made Su Ming's eyes light up. I was almost led astray by the old charlatan. He was a religious person, and I was a normal person. Wouldn't it be a pain to follow his thinking? Outside the world, it doesn't matter whether gods and ghosts really exist. As long as they can't really appear in life and can't be perceived, they are no different from farts. No, farts have a smell. Live your life as you should, eat and drink as you should. Thinking of this, he suddenly understood and grabbed the plate. How can you, a bodyguard, eat the customer's meal? What a gentlemanly man. Ludmila raised her middle finger boldly and turned to shout outside, "Send some more food." Tell them to find some fish, alive since religious issues are not considered, then think of some practical ways to deal with the ice spring ceremony later. Just when Su Ming got rid of his religious troubles, Moran's mercenaries also exchanged fire with a group of armed men on the outskirts of the mountain area.